So welcome to our November webinar. This is the topic that you've selected in September, because in October we had a slightly different program, as we had a whole week of events for BFRB Awareness Week. So now we're back with regular webinars. The topic that you've selected for this evening is breathing and grounding exercises for hair pulling. So I'm going to explain to you how they work, what's the difference, which one works, in my experience, best in which situation. And then we're going to try some out as well, because I would like to get a taste of how they work. In the meantime, as always, you're welcome to, I see there are already some questions coming up. You can always ask your questions in the Q&A, and then I will get to them once I'm done with the webinar. If there are some questions that you prefer to ask in private, you can email me. You'll have my email address later on. I just want to give you an update so that you know how to pose the questions and what kinds of questions to pose, is that I've decided not to record the Q&As. So I will stop the recording as soon as I close the poll for December. And once I'm done with the webinar, and then we will not record the Q&A, because people have told me that they don't feel necessarily comfortable sharing all the details that they want to if they know that the Q&A is going to end up on YouTube, like the webinar. So because of this, I've decided not to record the Q&As. So write whatever you feel is appropriate. Anyway, so here are the topics. So what are these techniques, breathing and grounding? Why those techniques for hair pulling? What's the benefit that you can expect to get from them? And we will go over 2 breathing exercises, and we will try 1 grounding exercise, but I will give you like 15 of them so that you can choose what you'd like to try. And then, of course, in the end, we will go through the Q&A. I'm hoping for once in my life to keep this short and practical. So let's see if I succeed in my intentions. So let's start with breathing exercises. What are they? So these are exercises that use manipulation of the breath in order to produce relaxation. So they're not a type of meditation. There's nothing you're supposed to observe or be mindful of. It is a very specific pattern of breathing that you introduce. It's obviously artificial, so you deliberately do something in order to cause relaxation. Breathing exercises are quite useful to alleviate anxiety, even when it's so intense that it produces a panic attack. So if your urge is intense, you can use breathing exercises, and they should work just fine. Sometimes, and we can discuss this maybe later on, you can combine a breathing exercise with your replacement technique just to make sure that you have all your bases covered. But they tend to be quite efficient, and in a matter of minutes, they can significantly relax your whole body. I don't know why words are so difficult for me this evening. The way that they work is really very quite mechanical. So they operate on a physiological level. What changes when you change your breathing pattern is the way that the gas is being exchanged in your body. Because normally, as you know, when you inhale, oxygen-rich air will come into your lungs, carbon dioxide will leave your blood, oxygen will come in, and then you will exhale carbon dioxide, right? And when we change the way we breathe, we change how this gas exchange takes place. And sometimes when we are very anxious, it's the specific nature of this exchange and the disruptions that happen that produce some of the symptoms of anxiety. I will not go into details about human physiology because I don't think it's necessary, but I will give you another snippet just so that you understand what is it that we're talking about. So essentially, think of breathing exercises as ways to correct dysfunctional breathing patterns. These dysfunctional breathing patterns, in addition to being, well, dysfunctional, can also be quite informative. So I will show you how you can, by observing how you breathe, what you can deduce about your stress levels or anxiety levels. So they can kind of teach you something about what's happening inside of you. So that's a bit extra something that we can get from these exercises. What is grounding, on the other hand? So with breathing exercises, we change the way we breathe, and we do that to correct dysfunctional breathing patterns. So it's a physiological thing. It acts on our biology. It has nothing to do with our mind. Grounding, on the other hand, is more of a technique that deals with the mind. So think of it like that: breathing on the body, grounding on the mind. Grounding exercises are meant to kind of anchor us in the present moment and pull us away from whatever we were involved with previously. Essentially, grounding is like mindfulness on demand. It's finding something that you will direct your attention to that will keep you in the present moment instead of being lost in thoughts or overwhelmed with intense feelings. For me, when I think about grounding and what it feels like, it's not quite like meditation practice, and it's not a meditation practice. I put this picture here on the right. This is a picture that I took last week on the beach. So this is a beach that I like to go to, and I like to stand on the sand or walk like in where the waters are. Well, it's a very shallow beach. Like I feel like you can walk halfway to Africa there and still be able to walk. So it's like a very shallow beach, and it has these very gentle waves. This is what it looks like most of the time when I'm there. And to me, this is what grounding feels like for me. So it's a moment where I am completely immersed in my senses instead of being in my head. If you've been to any of the previous webinars, you know that I have a proclivity for theory, which means that I do spend quite a lot of time in my head. And this is not always the best place to be, because our heads, they can be wonderfully creative, but also complete nightmares. So in that sense, grounding is something that is supposed to get you out of your head. For me, it's like walking on this beach. When I go there, it's exactly like grounding. Like I like my entire attention goes away from my thoughts and goes towards the sound of the waves, for example. On this particular day, the reason why I snapped the picture is because I love the colors, like the shapes of the waves and the color of the sea there and the sunset in the distance. It was really just, I don't know, like it was a very beautiful moment to me. So that's what grounding is when you're just completely, fully present in this one non-intellectual aspect of your experience. And we do this by manipulating attention and directing it to something very specific. I'll tell you a little bit about different ways in which you can do that later on. So whereas breathing exercises are quite efficient, as I said, for anxiety, grounding is quite helpful when people feel overwhelmed. So this is a very helpful moment when you can use grounding exercises, because they will gently pull away from whatever overwhelms you and from that feeling of not knowing where to go and what to do. If you have a self-soothing kit that you use, I don't know that we ever talked about this, and maybe that's something that we can make a whole webinar on, but I did offer to send resources for this, and I received like a bunch of emails. So I'm certain that I've sent instructions to someone. If you don't know what a self-soothing kit is, and if you'd like to learn, email me. You'll have my email at the end, and I'll be happy to send you the link. But if you have a self-soothing kit or several of them, including at least one grounding or one breathing exercise is very, very useful. So think of them as something that's very helpful to have in your toolbox. They might not work for everything and might not be appropriate in every situation, but when they are, they're very effective. Again, this is just my experience with using these techniques, not even teaching them. I think grounding is not always very easy for me to do everywhere, which is why the beach is an association for me. Because, for example, if I'm in a therapy session with my client, I can't really focus on what the chair feels like because it will pull me away from the conversation with my client. But I can do a breathing exercise if I feel that I need one. I mean, I've been working as a therapist for long enough that I don't exactly panic doing it, but theoretically, if I wanted to, as long as I'm not talking, I could do one. So in terms of which set of techniques is most applicable everywhere, I think breathing exercises win out. You can always do them nearly everywhere. As long as you remember the procedure, they can be done anywhere. So what to expect from these two sets of exercises or techniques? Both types will produce relaxation, and they will help you resist the urge to pull. If we're talking about thoughts, if we're talking about gradual urges, so those urges that kind of slowly build up, then using grounding early on is very effective. If the urge just comes about suddenly and it's very intense, then a breathing exercise might be the way to go. If you're aiming strictly for relaxation, then breathing exercises again might be more effective. Ultimately, your experience is always the judge, so try them out and see what works. I'm telling you here what works for most of my clients and certainly what works for me. Grounding allows you to find a sense of safety. So the reason why grounding gives us a sense of safety is because we go back to that very basic level of our experience, what we see, what we can touch, what we can taste, make sure that we're sitting in a safe place. Like that's how grounding operates, right? And by making us feel safe, it kind of lessens the intensity of the overwhelm, right? Grounding invites us to be more mindful, or at least of aspects of our experience, whereas breathing works physiologically, so it affects our body strictly. So for breathing exercises, you really don't have to be mindful, you just have to remember the recipe and do the exercise. Whereas grounding kind of wants you to become mindful. If you do practice mindfulness, for example, and you've had an intense day, both of these can be a good way to start off your exercise before you actually get to the meditation. It might be useful to spend 3, 4, 5 minutes doing a breathing exercise, for example. It can really make the experience of meditation smoother. How often do you pay attention to how you're breathing? You can learn quite a lot about your state of mind by paying attention to how you breathe. Everyone is different, but two basic rules that you have to remember, that would be useful for you to remember is when you're anxious or stressed, your breathing is very likely going to become shallow or shallower than normally it is, and it's going to become faster. Once it becomes shallow, that means that that you don't inhale too much air. That means that not a lot of gas exchange can take place. So not a lot of carbon dioxide can be expelled, not a lot of oxygen can get in. That means that you then consequently have to accelerate the pace of your breathing. So if it becomes shallower, it's immediately going to become faster as well. These two tend to come in pairs. Sometimes I've had my clients tell me that when we try to talk about how they feel and they don't know where to start, I will usually start with breathing or something that they feel in their body. And sometimes they will tell me that they don't even notice that they're breathing, which means that it's so shallow that they cannot even pay attention, notice that their lungs are expanding and contracting, right? So that's also, when you have that sensation, that's also an indication that you're anxious or stressed. On the other hand, when you're more relaxed, your breathing becomes deeper, and then it also slows down. And it's from this first state that we go to the second state when we do a breathing exercise. There are a lot of things, like since I like to meditate, I presume most of you know this, if this is not your first webinar, I can tell quite a lot by how my breathing changes Because if you've ever observed your breath for like 20 minutes, half an hour, or an hour, you'll notice that no two cycles of breathing in and breathing out are exactly the same. And then sometimes the pauses between breathing cycles can be long or short. I've learned over time that this can also tell me some things about what I'm feeling. I don't usually share these because they're very different for everyone. These two are usually nearly universal rules. So you can you can know that these two are accurate, and then observe how you breathe before you do a breathing exercise, and try to notice what changes you can observe and what you can connect them to. And you can learn really quite a lot about how you feel based on how you breathe. Add to this, if you have any tension in your shoulders or in your abdomen or your chest, and pretty much you're halfway there when it comes to identifying emotions. This is a digression slightly, but while I'm here, I might as well offer it. So how do breathing exercises work technically? I've explained physiologically how they work, what effects they have, but let's see how we create breathing exercises. I will show you two. One that is basic as it can possibly be, because that one is kind of fundamental and you need to know that one to use anything else. And then I will give you another breathing exercise that I think is particularly effective. And then we can try those out together here, because I would like you to get a taste of what they're like. So whenever you do a breathing exercise, the emphasis is not on breathing in any way whatsoever. When we meditate and observe our breath, in that case, we don't control our breathing. We just observe. If it's shallow, if it's deep, if it's fast or slow, it doesn't matter. All that we're doing, we're observing. But when it comes to breathing exercises, first we learn how to breathe through our diaphragm. So diaphragm is this long muscle that separates your lungs from your abdomen. It's essentially what your heart rests on, right? And then when you breathe, when you inhale and exhale, the diaphragm relaxes or contracts. Diaphragmatic breathing is that type of breathing where when you breathe in, let's say if you're sitting like I am now, your stomach will go out, and then when you breathe out, your stomach will come back in. Or if you're lying down, stomach will go up, and when you breathe out, it will come back down. So it's kind of belly breathing, I guess we can call it that way. If you've ever played the clarinet, for example, like I have, this is almost how you breathe normally, because you're used to it. They teach you that. But one way that you can make sure that this is what you're doing is to take a hand, put it on your belly, and then make sure that your hand is moving as you breathe in and breathe out. So let's try this now, because this is an important one. So if you're sitting, then try to sit up. If you're lying down, then just lie down on a flat surface. Just remove the pillow if you can. Put your right or left hand on your belly. And then inhale into your lungs deeply, but kind of push the air downward in lower parts of your lungs. Then wait a moment and breathe out. Do it a few times and make the hand the point of focus to make sure that your hand is moving up and down. Okay, if anyone had any trouble with this, use the Q&A and describe what trouble you were experiencing with it. This alone can be a breathing exercise that is just soothing enough. So you can do this as many times as you like. What I would propose is to inhale deeply and then pause and count to 3, and then allow your body to spontaneously breathe out. So inhale as much as you can. So push your belly forward as much as it'll go. Count to 3. And then slowly, spontaneously breathe out. Once you've mastered this, you can pretty much do any breathing technique. If you're doing it still, pay attention if you have enough air in your lungs, if you feel like you inhale enough. See if you can try counting to 3 slower each time, and see if anything happens, if maybe you feel like you don't have enough oxygen, or maybe you can breathe even slowly. It's helpful when you slow down your breathing cycle just a little bit each time. The reason why we prefer breathing in through the diaphragm is because it extends our lung capacity further. So it expands the lower parts of our lungs, which can take in more air. When the breathing is very shallow, your lungs are not completely filled with air. And our lungs are kind of shaped, this is not anatomically the most accurate description, but kind of like a pyramid in a sense that they become, the base of the lungs is more massive, it's wider, it's longer, it's thicker. So there's a lot more space for air to fill it in. And then when that's where air comes in, it pushes the diaphragm, and in turn, the diaphragm pushes your abdomen out. That's why it's called diaphragmatic breathing. Different breathing exercises will have different patterns. So some will say count to 3, some will say count to 5. Some will tell you how long to inhale, how long to breathe out. So they will regulate different aspects of this, but of the breathing cycle, but they all have 2 things in common. One is they will slow down the cycle overall. And second, they will increase the length of time that the air is actually in your lungs, so facilitating gas exchange. This might seem like a silly thing to keep mentioning, this gas exchange thing that takes place, but this actually is very important. It determines it helps regulate the pH of your blood. Carbon dioxide and oxygen have a different effect on your blood vessels. So your blood vessels might dilate or constrict. Your heart rate will go up or down depending on how much oxygen there is in your blood. So what you're actually doing is you're soothing your entire organism by providing something that is vitally important for it. If it happens that you breathe in and you don't feel like there's enough air in your lungs, this is okay. This is not a sign of, if you have a lung problem, it might be related to this. But for most people, this is just a sign of anxiety. It's a sign of residual tension. So even if you feel like you've inhaled as much as you can, and you still don't have enough air, you don't have to count to 3 slowly. You can count a little faster, then exhale, but exhale intentionally, and try to take out as much air as you can. And then next time when you breathe in, you will take in a little more air. So the more anxious you are, the more patient you have to be when you introduce these exercises. The point is not for you to feel like you're suffocating, right? So this is why I didn't say 3 seconds, I said count to 3, because then you get to decide how quickly you count. I usually suggest that first time you do it by counting regularly, like 1, 2, 3. Then second time you can take it a little slower and do 1, 2, 3, then see how far you can go. The point is not to deprive yourself of air, but to just learn how to consciously slow down that breathing cycle. Because remember, if it's fast and shallow, you're anxious and stressed. If it's deep and slow, you're relaxed. And we want to go to deep and slow breathing. So that's the whole wisdom of it. You can find, I used to give workshops on these exercises and they were a lot of fun, like they were quite relaxing. But here, because the webinar is supposed to be short, and I will give you this one because this is the fundamental one. And then I will show you another one, which is very, very effective. But if you Google breathing exercises or just email me, I can send you a list of a few more. There's quite a few of them out there. But the ones that I'm presenting is a simple one like this that works well. And I'm going to show you now another one. Okay, so these are the instructions, but I think I've already explained kind of how it works. The other one that I will show you is, in my opinion, the most effective breathing exercise, at least the most effective one that I have encountered just yet. It's called box breathing, and some people call it also square breathing. I have to say, I call it box breathing because this is how I learned it, but square breathing makes actually quite a lot of sense. In this exercise, I will guide you through the exercise and give you all the instructions. But the reason why square is a good metaphor is because in this exercise, we will lengthen every aspect of the breathing cycle. So if you break down how you breathe, what happens is that you breathe in, right? So that's part one. Then there's like a short, almost invisible pause when your lungs are filled and there's this gas exchange happening. So there's that, the second part, the holding. And then there's breathing out. And then there's the pause between breathing out and breathing in again. There is a technique, this is again a digression, but I can't control myself. There is a technique in mindfulness, when you learn meditation, where your focus is on your breath, but specifically you focus on those pauses between breaths. And it's really fascinating how variable they are and how our body adjusts our breathing really from moment to moment. It's an incredibly well-regulated process. So here, when it comes to box breathing, we're going to tell our bodies, okay, it's very nice that you're regulating it so precisely, but we need to take control of this at least for a few minutes. So remember, there are 4 parts to the breathing cycle. With box breathing, we extend all of them. Because there are 4 parts and there are 4 sides to square, I think square breathing is also a perfectly good name. Here's how it's done. All you need to remember is number 4. Just quite literally just number 4. You inhale, and you inhale while you're counting to 4. Then you hold your breath until you count to 4. Then you breathe out, surprise, surprise, until you count to 4. And then you pause until you breathe in again, until you count to 4. And can you guess the recommended time? 4 minutes. In 4 minutes of doing all these 4s, this is a very, very relaxing exercise. This is something that Navy SEALs are taught as a way to relax when they're in extremely stressful situations. And even though I'm sure that we all lead very stressful lives, I'm willing to bet that Navy SEALs have a more stressful life than most of us here on the call. And if it works for them, it really will work for us. The reason why I'm saying this is because I will give this breathing exercise as a kind of first aid for my clients. And then they will come back and say, tried it, didn't work. And then I say, well, how long did you try it for? And they will be like, well, I did it once. And so in my mind, that means for 4 minutes, but usually they mean they just do it once. Because it acts on our physiology. Our physiology is fast, but it's not that fast. So you need to give it a couple of minutes. There are some breathing exercises that you shouldn't do more than 2 or 3 minutes, which is why I didn't include them. I included box breathing because you can do this as long as necessary. I quite like box breathing, and I do it sometimes actually with no reason at all. I just really like how it makes me feel. Even when I'm relaxed, there's like an additional layer of being relaxed that I discover with this. And it's simple to remember, just number 4. This is a very versatile breathing exercise because you can use it everywhere. You can be in a meeting, you can be with people, no one will know. So we're going to do it together now. I'm going to guide you. I won't count to 4 out loud every time because I don't know. It's I just don't think it's necessary. I will tell you inhale, hold, breathe out, and all this. And just so you know, every time I'm going to start with a relatively, let's say, fast or moderate pace, something that I would say comes naturally to me. And then each time when we repeat the cycle, we're going to do it slightly slower. And I'm going to turn on the timer right now on my phone so that I make sure that we actually do it for 4 minutes, so that you know right now what kind of an effect it has on you. And then you can decide whether you maybe need to do it longer or if this is sufficient. Before we actually do the exercise, I would like you to do something so that we can compare before and after. Pay attention to what your breathing is right now. Like, what is it like spontaneously? Is it shallow or deep? Notice that first. Pay attention to your shoulders, to the back of your neck, your chest. See if there's any tension anywhere. Okay, so I'm going to press start, and then I'm going to start guiding you. Inhale slowly and deeply into your belly. Now hold. Breathe out. And hold again. Holding between breaths can be a little difficult, but it'll get easier. Inhale again. Hold. Breathing out. And hold again. Okay, one more time. Inhale. Hold. Breathe out, but make sure you squeeze all the air out. And hold. And inhale again. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Breathing out, expelling as much air as you can. 2, 3, 4, and hold. Inhaling again, we're halfway through. Hold. Breathing out, make sure to push all the air out. 3 and 4, empty lungs now. Hold. And breathing in once more. Hold. Breathing out, pushing the air out, emptying the lungs. And hold. Breathing in again. Maybe paying attention to your muscles, seeing if anything changes. Hold. Breathing out. and hold again. We're almost done, 30 seconds left. Breathing in one last time. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold. 1, 2, 3, 4. Breathing in, pushing as much air as you can out. 3, 4. And hold one final time. 3 and 4. And now you can allow your body to breathe in any way it wants to. Pause for a second now and see if there's a difference. How is your body choosing to breathe in this moment? What about your muscles? Do you feel any change in tension or any sensations that you may have been feeling? See if anything's different. I see that there are some questions coming up now regarding box breathing. Even though I will go through the list of questions later on, I just want to address if there are any issues with the technique. I want to make sure to see them now. Okay, so I see that some of you are asking me some questions that are not related to breathing exercises. That's fine. I will get to them in the Q&A. I just want to check if there are any, if anyone has had a difficult reaction to this or wants to share anything. I just want to read these and answer these now. So these breathing exercises help when I can't stop pulling. Yes, they help when you feel the urge. They help when you start pulling. They can help it practically at any moment when it comes to pulling. If you're actually pulling while you start doing them, I suggest that you also try sitting on your hands. This is quite useful because it will physically stop you from pulling. And then the breathing exercise will, oh, I see that someone is raising their hand. Just type in the question or your comment or your impressions in the Q&A. So you can sit on your hands. Alternatively, you can use one of your fidget toys. For example, I have a little stress ball here, and you can also use the stress ball to coordinate the breathing. So breathing in, you squeeze the ball. When you hold your breath, you relax. When you breathe out, you squeeze again, or you can reverse that, whatever feels natural. But if you feel like you need to get some additional energy out, this is one way in which you can do that. What are we supposed to do exactly in pausing between breaths in the box breathing exercise? Try not to breathe at all, or we can. So when you, there it is. So hold your breath means when you inhale and your lungs are full, it means don't inhale additional air, don't breathe out, just hold all the air inside your lungs, because that way you're allowing your body to exchange all the gases that it wants to exchange. And then in the breathing out part, where you pause between breaths, your lungs should be completely empty. So this is why I mentioned when I was guiding you, I was saying breathe out as much as you can. That was my, if you remember, because the idea is to empty your lungs and then have your lungs be empty while you count to 4. I noticed that sometimes when I teach this technique, like in a workshop or in a different setting, not in a webinar, this step tends to be a little difficult for people if they're extremely anxious. So in that case, you can maybe cheat a little and then breathe in, but try not to breathe in fully, just a little bit. And then next time around, try not to do that. Or another way that you can cheat your way through the exercise is to count slightly faster in this stage if it's difficult, because being with your lungs empty can be challenging. But that's the gist of it. So hold just means in whatever condition your lungs are in. If they're full of air, keep them that way. When you breathe out, if they're empty, keep them that way. I felt that the box breathing made my body temperature rise. Yes, very likely. I described that to myself like tension is evaporating from my body. But it's also likely that what it did was kind of open up your blood vessels a little bit. And then that's it. Sometimes people can also be a little flush in the face when they do breathing exercises. Box breathing tends to be quite harmless, but some of them, you can even download, like there are ebooks and stuff about breathing exercises. In my opinion, I have a few printed and Kindle versions. I don't think they're worth the money because you can find all this mostly online or stuff like that. But box breathing is the one that you can do as much as you want. That was my point. And is this something that helps the urges? Absolutely, yes. With box breathing, you can soothe pretty intense urges, and you can also combine box breathing, like I said, with a stress ball. That's quite convenient because you can coordinate clenching your fist and releasing with different parts of the exercise. Or you can simply use a fidget, or you can sit on your hands. And in about 4 minutes, it should alleviate the urge. You can do it longer than that, of course. You can repeat the whole exercise. There are some simpler breathing exercises. Is there a way to write in this thing? There is, perfect. I'm going to write under above this dog. So there's a breathing exercise that's called 3x3 breathing. This one is very simple, and it's quite useful before you start. Like if you feel a little bit of tension before you start an activity, this is good. I will sometimes use 3x3 breathing in the beginning of my meditation sessions. So here what you do, you inhale, hold your breath for 3 seconds, then just exhale, breathe out, and then do that 3 times. It's very, very simple. This is why it's called 3x3. So breathe in, hold 3 seconds, exhale, repeat 3 times. As you can see, once again, the whole philosophy is to allow your lungs to really kind of do their work, to keep the air in a little longer and to slow down your breathing cycle. This is also a very simple exercise, and you can repeat this as much as you can. If you want to teach your child a breathing exercise, for example, I would recommend starting with this one because it's really, really simple. Okay, so now this option is, I keep annotating this. Okay. So now this is going to stand here. Sorry, how do I delete this now? Okay. I have no idea what I have just done. Oh, there's an eraser. Oh, how smart. Okay. So this was me. I do apologize for this. Apparently Zoom decided to quit because it did not like me annotating things. But we're back. Okay, so now we're moving on to the second part, which are grounding techniques. I already explained how they work and what their point is. I'm going to give you here, as you can see in this slide and the next one, I'm going to give you quite a few of them, and I'm going to guide you through this one. So the simplest one would be to just take any object that you have around you in your hand and then gently touch it and focus on the sensations. If your pulling is oriented towards the sensory aspect, this is quite useful. I have a lot of rocks around me because for some reason, I like collecting rocks on the beach. This one has a hole in it, and I thought it was quite fascinating. You see, otherwise it's a very smooth stone. So you take an object, and then you touch it on all sides, close your eyes, and just focus on what the sensations are like. For this exercise, you can actually cheat if you know the kind of sensation that feels good for you. You can have something ready, Like there are stone, I have another, I don't know if there are people who collect normal things, but I collect stones from the beach. Like there's this black stone that I found, because this is like, I don't know how you call it. It's kind of rough. Um, it's that stone that's made from anyway, I live very close to the volcano Etna, so that's from the volcanic lava when you can find them quite easily. And that stone has like a very rough texture. So that is also very pleasant to touch. The important thing about this grounding is not to clench the stone in your fist very strongly, but instead to just kind of touch it very gently, to caress the stone. Alternatively, what you can do is you can just start observing it in detail. I can't see well with or without the glasses, so observing anything in detail is really not my approach. But this is something that also works well. Because here, let's say you're ruminating on something and you're afraid that your thoughts are going to lead you straight to pulling. Doing this is going to focus all your attention on this tactile kind of aspect and ground you in it. That's why it's called a grounding technique. Another one, which is a little intense for my taste, is you can take an ice cube and hold it in your hand and watch it as it melts, or you can put it in your mouth and then focus on the coolness. This is something that can be a little aggressive to put it in your mouth, but if you feel like the urge is very intense, and if you feel like you're going to enter into one of those trance-like states, this tends to be quite well to just jolt you out of it. Another thing, but sorry, 1 second. I forgot to turn off my timer. Another thing that you can do is categorical thinking. So you can if you have a self-soothing kit, or you can even prepare like a grounding kit, and then put different categories like capital cities, or I don't know, classical music pieces, composers, artists, whatever you want. You pull one out, and then you're supposed to list as many as you can out loud. You can do that with writers, poets, movie stars, whatever it is that you know a lot about, right? So the point is that this is supposed to engage your mind in a different way, and therefore pull away from whatever it is that you were worrying about and that was going to lead to pulling. You can do math. This is especially effective if you're bad at math. You can do subtraction, for example, like 100 minus 7 and then 93 minus 7 and so on. The reason why I say that this is good when you're bad at math is because you have to focus more on calculating correctly. And when you focus on subtracting, you're not focusing on the urge to pull or the overwhelm that you might be feeling. So it separates you from it. You have this who am I grounding technique, which frankly I never use, but it does help some people, which is to just say who you are. Like say, my name is such and such. I'm, extremely young. I live here and do this and yada, yada. It's kind of just to remember who you are. And then you can also use an anchoring phrase as an addition to this or as a separate technique. Like something that helps you remember why is it that you want to stop pulling. Like it's best if you condense it, make it very, very short. That also helps. A question also helps, I have to say. So one question that I like to use, even though I speak ill about the Stoics, I do steal their ideas sometimes. Like they frequently, like one of the basic things about Stoic philosophy was what is it that you can control and what is it that you cannot control. And sometimes I ask myself this when I find that I'm kind of overthinking and trying to find solutions for something that maybe doesn't even need solving. I will just pause and then ask myself, what is in your control right now? And then I will just move in that direction. But that question for me has this effect of like cutting through all the fog of being overwhelmed, because it brings me down to what's manageable. I don't have to take care of everything, just this little part. So that's what helps me, for example. But you can also use a phrase. Like if you use loving kindness meditations, you can rip one of the phrases from there, one that resonates with you. I like the phrase, may I live in peace. or may I be free from suffering. It's a part of a set of phrases that I use in loving kindness meditations in my own practice. And then I will just say that, like, may I be free from suffering, because for whatever reason, this really works. It's like Xanax for me. I remember when I was passing my board exams, and for step 2 clinical skills, which is like maybe the easiest one, but you stand in front of this door before you have this voice telling you that you can begin your examination. And it's very anxiety inducing to me because you can't move. If you move, if you touch the door, you've been disqualified. It's very strict. And that alone just made me feel very anxious, in addition to the fact that you just don't want to fail that because you spend time preparing. It's a very expensive test. You want to pass the freaking test. And I remember standing there in front of that door, almost panicking. And I just told myself, may I be free from suffering? And I swear it just kind of, just immediately, I just released all the tension that I felt. So you can find a phrase that has that effect on you and use that as a way to ground in it. Grounding techniques, the sequel. So there's more of these. You can stamp your feet on the ground. You can either do it like this, or you can simply just press them very firmly on the floor. The reason why this helps as a grounding technique is, first of all, because contracting the muscles will help you get some of that energy out that we feel when we're restless or when there's an urge present. And second of all, because by touching, it's almost like an unconscious way of communicating with yourself, that you're telling yourself you're on firm ground, you're safe, especially when you press your feet firmly against the floor. This is also, the pressing against the floor is also quite useful because you can use it pretty much anywhere. No one is going to think that, you're just keeping your feet on the floor as most people do, so it's nothing unusual. You can clap your hands. That also has the benefit of creating noise. You can rub your hands together, or you can press your palms like this, if you can see. You can also interlock your hands like this, and then just try to stretch them out as much as you can. This is also very helpful because it does release some of the tension. It's almost like limited progressive muscle relaxation. You can sing your favorite song. I never do this because hearing myself singing just aggravates me further. But if you like to sing, by all means. You can just take 5 slow, deep breaths, but then focus on how the air is entering or leaving your nose. So that's not a very effective one, but it's also a grounding technique that works for some people. Clenching your hands into fists and releasing them, it works well. So you clench both of your fists, you hold them for 3 seconds, clenched as much as you can, and then you release. Even if you do it just once, you can feel like some tension leaving your body. So you can repeat this 10 times. That would be one grounding technique. So clench, hold, release, and then repeat 10 times. You can also draw or doodle or color. Like you have those adult coloring books that are quite good because they tend to focus you. These doodles here cost several tens of thousands of dollars because they were made by Henry Miller, but this is an example of how you can doodle to ground yourself. And now I'm going to show you a technique that is slightly more complex because you have to learn what you're supposed to do for each number. It's called 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The reason why I put this image on the right is, I don't know why, but whenever it comes to visual stimulation, this is actually an oil painting by Ralph Goings. He was one of the photorealists from the 60s. So there was this, after abstract expressionism, there was this movement. I believe they were kind of located more on the West Coast, if I'm not mistaken. There are a few of them that I like, but Ralph Goings is my favorite one. He paints these things like ketchup bottles, or there's something just so remarkably like a donut or a coffee cup. Most of his paintings are set in these these diners. I don't know, you can just tell that it's in some godforsaken road next to nothing. And for whatever reason, visually, I find that to be delightful. So just looking at this already makes me calm, but that is not the grounding technique. This is just my weirdness. So the technique is called 5-4-3-2-1. The idea is before you do this, you can take maybe a few deep breaths and sit on your hands if you're feeling particularly agitated. And then what you do is you let your eyes roam around the room. So you don't control your gaze, just let it float where it wants, and name out loud 5 things that you see. So in my case, for example, I can see my speakers, I can see a painting that's here, I can see a deck of playing cards right here. So first five things that spontaneously pop into your mind. This step already starts to kind of detach you from your thoughts or feelings, because you are not just naming the first 5 things, you're first allowing your eyes to slowly move where they want to move. You kind of let your eyes guide you. So you name 5 things that you see, then 4 things that you feel. Not in the sense like sadness, although this is a good answer as well, but more like, for example, my left hand is now resting in my lap. So I can feel my left hand in my lap. I can feel like slight pain here in the back of my neck because I cannot seem to find a good place to put my webcam and the screen. So 4 things that you can feel, 3 things that you can hear. It's really difficult because it's quiet. There's someone in the street. I can hear my own voice, obviously. And I have ringing in my ears, so my left ear is ringing. But as you can see, sometimes these require you to slow down. That's the whole point of grounding. Then 2 things that you can smell, and then 1 thing that you can taste. For this one, you can put something in your mouth and taste it, or you can just see what your mouth tastes like and try to describe that taste. The idea is for each of these, you're supposed to kind of take your time and really look at these things or feel them or hear them or smell them. Now, the question is what to do and when. Ultimately, I said this before and I will say it a million times, your experience with these techniques will tell you absolutely, when you should use them and when you shouldn't. Whenever I give you advice, it's just something that works for most people. However, each and one of you may not be most people. So one thing that I have to say is don't judge the technique by its first attempt. The first time we try something, it might not work as well because we rush through it, or just it's not the right time to try it, or if I'm already relaxed and I do a breathing exercise, there's only so much that there's only so much that one can relax. So you might not feel its full effect. The first time when you use it in a real-time situation, when you feel the urge to pull, you might want to try it 2 or 3 or 4 times because it could be difficult. So don't judge it by those first attempts. And this goes for everything. When people in the program start introducing replacement techniques, I will usually tell them, for example, try it out for a week and then let's see how it works. Because usually with repeated use, you understand what's the best way to do it, where it works, where it doesn't work, what its limitations are, what its advantages are. So don't judge it immediately, give it some time, and then try to replace it if it's necessary. So when the urge starts with low intensity, but then builds up and becomes stronger, like this, for example, is when you start your day, and then as you go to work, you slowly become stressed, right? Then it's useful to use grounding, but in the very beginning or throughout the day. Especially if you have a job that is very dynamic and you have to go from one task to another and then to another, it's very useful to make these little short breaks to do some grounding exercises. As you can see, they're all very simple. You don't need any special equipment to do grounding exercises. but they can really help de-stress you in the moment. Because if you just stay with, I don't know, observing an object or paying attention to what you see and feel, it takes a minute, and it can really de-stress you and just bring you back to the present moment. So that way you can prevent the urge from escalating further. They're rarely effective, grounding exercises specifically, when the urge is extremely intense, or when you're about to go into this trance state. Then it's very likely not going to work. They work very well when you use them, as I said, throughout the day. So in a sense, you can think of grounding as a form of stimulus control. When the urge is acute, so when it's very strong and when it comes about suddenly, breathing exercises are what you want to do, because their relaxation effect is more pronounced than for grounding, generally. Perhaps for you it's different, but this is a rule of thumb, nothing more. As one of my meditation teachers says, every rule is useful until it is no longer useful. So in more intense moments, it's simpler to rely on breathing, because, for example, to do box breathing, all you need to know is how to count to 4. You don't have to be able to unglue yourself from your thoughts and then focus on observing an object around you, for example. So they're easier to apply. A breathing exercise can be thought of as a flexible competing response, in a sense. So it's something that you use when you would want to pull or when you feel the urge to pull. If you wish to combine other competing responses with breathing exercises, this is a good idea. And you can also combine breathing exercises and grounding. If you want to do that, to combine breathing and grounding, first you always do breathing, then you do grounding. They have slightly different effects, but breathing is a rougher, more effective one. And then grounding can give you that kind of fine finish to just polish out any remaining parts of the urge. So remember that combination. If you use grounding first and then breathing later, it's very likely not going to be effective in dealing with the urge, but the other way around works quite well. So this is everything I had to say, and I can't believe it took me an hour, but it did. So here we are. I'm going to close the poll first to see what we will be talking about in December. And then I'm going to close turn off the recording, and then we will go to the Q&A. So you can still ask questions if you have any, but let's see what won. I don't know why in this update, it doesn't tell me I have to look through everything. Oh no, there's no tie. Okay, so what won with 35% of your votes? Self-soothing, biology, psychology, and practical aspects. So we will be talking about self-soothing, and I will have to introduce other techniques for you that do not involve breathing or grounding. So that will be an exciting challenge for me. So that's what we will be talking about in December. I'm going to turn off the recording now and go to the Q&A.